Hi, and welcome to this week's UMIP Community Review call. This week we have two UMIPs under consideration. The first is a contract upgrade to add the optimistic asserter, and then the second is a price identifier which works with the optimistic asserter, which asserts truth. If we start with the optimistic asserter, the contract upgrade, Rainis, would you be able to talk us through this proposed UMIP?
Yes, so basically optimistic asserter is a new contract that allows optimistic oracle pattern similarly as existing optimistic oracle contract does, but with a few simplifications that allows for easier integration for partners to build on top of this contract. So the one thing in that is being simplified in comparison to optimistic oracle is that there are no more price requests. Instead, whenever the user wants to get some data verified through this oracle, it has to make a claim and assert its truthfulness. So, and if the request, if this assertion is considered to be true, then this optimistic asserter contract allows to optimistically settle that claim while giving anyone opportunity to dispute that if the data being asserted is not in fact true. And from the perspective of UMA voters who resolve these disputes, this is also the bit simpler question, rather than responding directly what the true value of some price request is. Instead, the voters would be tasked with to verify whether or not the assertion claim made by the initial asserter is true or false. Sure, they would need to verify and get this data to check that, but what is brought on chain is only a boolean of whether or not this assertion is true or not. And for this particular UMIP of adding the optimistic asserter contract, it adds first thing to this contract to the registry, so that the optimistic asserter contract would be able to make oracle requests through DVM in case of disputes. And the second item that's being proposed is to register also optimistic asserter implementation on all supported networks in the Finder contract, so that any client contracts and applications who might use this optimistic asserter contract could easily locate what's the correct implementation of this optimistic asserter contract and could easily integrate with it. So yeah, that's in brief overview of what optimistic asserter is.
Thanks for that, Rainis. That was a really clear explanation. The UMIP also refers to the use of escalation managers. Would you like to just briefly speak about what an escalation manager is?
Yes, so escalation managers provides add-on functionality wherever it's needed. But the contract also works by default settings even without these escalation managers, if there is no requirements for any more complex use cases. But if there are more complex use cases that for example, requires filtering or whitelisting who can actually be the party who can make these assertions, or maybe whitelisting who can dispute these assertions, or also any control of bond amounts and currencies, then this optimistic asserter contract allows possibility to designate the dedicated escalation manager contract that manages these aspects for that hold some properties and enforce the policies of this assertion, whatever they might be, and it really is up to the integrating application who is building on top of optimistic asserter to decide what kind of functionality is required.
Super, thank you, Enos. Alex, John, any comments on the optimistic asserter proposed UMIP contract upgrade?
I don't think so right now. Has there been like a testnet deployment that I could go and look at along with the contract?
Yes. This UMIP definitely has to be updated. So that there's both testnet deployment on Gurley, and there is also already deployment on all the production networks like SRE Mainnet, Polygon, Boba, Optimism, and Arbitrum. So this address needs to be filled in here. They are already in protocol repo networks file, so it's just a matter of copying them over here.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Seamus. Thanks again as well to John and Sean for joining us. We've really just been talking through the optimistic asserter, and Renus has given us a bit of an overview of what it does and why it's important. Any other comments that either of you would like to raise?
So I know I joined a couple minutes late, so I might have missed this. So the optimistic asserter and the assert truth UMIP would basically pass at the same time, since it's relying on assert truth?
Well, yeah, we can touch upon the assert truth identifier separately, but it would be expected that it's better to do them in the same time, because assert truth identifier is the default identifier encoded in this optimistic asserter contract. Sure, the contract could be live there even without it, but it would not be usable by default without this assert truth identifier.
Got it. And so that's the default, but does that mean that you could also use it with a different identifier for other use cases?
Yeah, exactly. So the optimistic asserter contract is quite flexible, and if you want to have some more advanced method of how and where to verify these claims, or there's specific data source that this application needs to define, then there sure is opportunity to first get this separate price identifier approved, and then reference that in assertions.
And do you think there would be some backwards compatibility with existing identifiers to some extent?
Oh, well, theoretically, yes, there could be some backwards, like compatibility with yes or no identifier, but it's not really suggested to be used in production, because there might be some edge cases. And as long as this default assert truth identifier is approved, then it's suggested better to use that.
Okay, cool.
It's also could be like confusing to use the yes or no identifier, because like with assert truth, you're being asked to say yes, this proposal in this other place was correct, or no, it was not. Right? So with like yes or no, you're asked to actually like answer the question that's being asked, not say if like the proposed or asserted answer to the question is correct. So you get into like kind of double negative situations. So
yeah, that makes sense.
Cool.
This also means the DVM can, for like assert truth, could only ever return two values, right? Like you can only ever return 0 or 1, right, Rainus?
Yes, absolutely. So also the optimistic asserter contract is resolving to true only if the value of 1 is being returned. So any other value would still make the assertion false, but normally we would expect, and that's what assert truth identifier is also specifying, that there are only two values. One only if the assertion can be verified being truthful, and if it can't, for whatever reason, whether or not the claim is wrong or it's just not possible to resolve, then the 0 should be resolved.
Okay. And so then the integration pattern, if you needed some other number, like let's say the number you need is 7, you would go to some contract, say like the answer is 7, and make that assertion. You would get back from UMA's system 1, which means you can then use the 7 value that you stored earlier.
But
Yes,
requesting contract would need to then save the state of this assertion contents. So normally the requesting contract would encompass this and compose the claim consisting of the data being asserted. Like, for example, assertion could be that I'm asserting the price of ETH is now like 1200 or something like that, and then the numerical value would be part of the claim, but it's up to the requesting contract to figure out how to manage that claim, and whether or not it needs to store that value or not. It's up to the requesting contract.
Okay.
Cool. From reading through the document, unless anybody has any objections, it seems like this is a goal with conditions to respond to comments and to add in the additional chains. Would that be correct?
Yes, that definitely needs to be. Main thing is adding these deployment address. They are already out there. They deployed and verified. So yes, that can be done shortly.
Cool.
Which additional
Any
chains?
conditions? Sorry, Sean?
Which additional chains?
I just saw a note in the UMIP saying that there was an Ethereum, a Polygon, and then there was other chains to do.
Yes, but yes, those would be like Optimism, Boba, and Arbitrum.
Okay. And then, are we only talking about the identifier right now, or are we talking about the asserter and the assert truth together?
We're only talking about the optimistic asserter contract at the minute.
Gotcha. Okay. Also, I know we needed new proposal scripts for this, which would be like the main dependency of being able to vote on this week. Do you know the status of those by chance?
They're in reviews, so there's open PR for these proposal scripts being made, and some of the comments being addressed there.
Sweet.
So who would be proposing? Would it be John still, or would it be someone more familiar with optimistic asserter?
I think Rainus or Pablo, like Pablo over at the scripts, right?
Okay. Cool. Excellent. Shall we move on to the assert truth identifier now?
Let's do it.
Super. This is the second of the two MIPs. And it's a price identifier designed to be used with the previous contract. Rainus, do you want to talk us through this again?
Yes, so shortly, this price identifier, specifically the default identifier for the optimistic asserter contract, and it's supposed to be general application in a sense that any kind of assertions could be theoretically being made here. And as per optimistic asserter requirements, the answer to this price identifier is only possible yes or no, where yes is being represented by a value of 1 scaled to like multiplied by 10 scaled up by like 18 decimals, and value of no is represented by value of 0. And specifically the way how the voters should resolve is that whenever there is a dispute on assertion, the emitted logs and from events will indicate assertion ID, and based on that assertion ID, the voters should verify and get the event where the original assertion was made, and look at the claim property in the event. So this claim would contain a string of assertion being made. It's an arbitrary like string. It can be it can contain like any text. But it's supposed to also be something that can be deterministically verified. And so in a case if voters can resolve and can interpret meaningfully this claim, then they're supposed to verify it unless there's specific date and time indicated in this claim. By default, they should do this at assertion time. If not, then they also should check if there's some specific timestamp mentioned, then do the check at the timestamp mentioned in the claim. And based on the answer, they have to respond basically yes or no to this simple assertion.
Cool. Thank you for that, Renus. Any comments on the UMIP?
I was just seeing the one comment about checking when the dispute was made rather than when the assertion was made. Trying to wrap my head around that one, but
yes,
I guess
yes, that was more for the edge case of figuring out which implementation of optimistic asserter you would need to check these events, and normally it's not expected to happen within a cycle of this dispute, as any upgrade would be planned also through governance. But yeah, whenever just to be on the safe side and being able to determine this at the point the price request is made. So at DVM, it means that dispute already happened, and it's easier to identify the contract who's making that request at dispute timestamp.
okay.
But it doesn't mean that the assertion should be made by the time of dispute. Assertion should be verified based on the timestamp of assertion, or alternatively, if there's some alternative timestamp indicated in the claim, then within that timestamp. But this specific question on the timestamps was more like figuring out which contract voter should check for events. And there's only one canonical optimistic asserter per chain, so there shouldn't be much confusion around that.
Okay. And I guess just thinking about this, so say that an assertion comes through and gets disputed in the middle of a transition to a new optimistic asserter contract. The assertion and the dispute would both go through the original optimistic asserter. Like, could you identify it by the contract that is hitting the DVM?
Yeah, I think that would be challenge, and in that case, it means that from the optimistic asserter is constructed in a way that if there is any such upgrade, it means that this resolved price. Yeah, let me see. Yeah, it should be able also to get this resolved price from any upgraded contract as this optimistic asserter.
Wait, so the dispute?
Yeah. Within the optimistic asserter, it would be possible to store this data, but it's more a question of like client contracts who build on top of that, whether or not this data is stored, and it's up to any upgraded optimistic asserter contract on how that would handle any backwards compatibility. Currently, we don't have any, because this is the first contract, but if the applications require that, it means that any new optimistic asserter contract would need to provide method for its requesting contract to figure out what was resolved state of any assertions that were initiated in previous versions, but we currently don't have that use case, and as that would be up to any upgraded contract if there would be any.
Okay, so let's say that there's an assertion from a requesting contract. Can that requesting contract have a callback once the assertion is resolved?
Yes, there's a possibility. That's also optional field that any like request can make and signal that it's willing to receive these callbacks, and whenever optimistic asserter gets this resolved, either optimistically or through dispute up to DVM, then it would trigger this callback and send it back to the requesting contract.
Okay, so then I'm trying to think this through. So if there was an assertion that was made and then it's waiting for a callback, it's either going to get it when that assertion with the original asserter contract is resolvable, like once it expires and you settle it. So you would be settling it, like let's say an upgrade is happening in between. You would still settle that original one with the original asserter contract. And then if there is a dispute, there's going to be a callback that's more tied to your result is going to come from the DVM, which is
Yes.
Okay. So you would still get it. I'm just trying to think if there would be a point where like the callback system would break and you would need some kind of like emergency way to do stuff if like an integrating contract relies on callbacks in order to do whatever it does. But I don't think that it should. You would just need to know
Yes, and it would be, but it would be totally valid question for any like implementer of any whenever upgraded version of optimistic asserter is proposed, to make sure that there is this built-in backwards compatibility, not to break things.
Okay. And if it gets upgraded, you would still be able to raise a dispute with the original one, right?
Yes, absolutely. Because it's also up to the requesting contract to figure out how they want to locate the implementation. They're free. The Finder interface will be up there and available to allow any upgrades, but there are also, I can imagine, applications that just sets static optimistic asserter, and as long as this old optimistic asserter is being able to make price requests at DVM, the application would still continue working as expected.
Okay. And the only case I can think of that might be an issue is if you had a callback only on dispute and the asserter gets upgraded in the middle of like an active assertion. and then you get a dispute with the original one. I'm not sure if that's tied at all to like what's being referenced in the finder, or if like the finder would be pointing to like optimistic asserter v2 or something, you know, maybe like a different
Yes,
identifier. With the finder.
yes, you're right. There is the edge case. In this case, if any like application is using the old instance of this optimistic asserter and it's not yet in finder, then this would be wrong. So yeah, unfortunately there is no good way for or easy way to reference the the address of requesting contract when it's made across chain. Currently it's possible only I believe through Polygon. Whenever price requests are made on Polygon, the requesting contracts address is being passed as part of ancillary data, while if it's on any layer 2 chains, this information is not presented at DVM, at least currently how Oracle Spoke is being implemented.
I think you brought up a really interesting and thoughtful edge case there, John. But it does occur to me that it's a bit theoretical because we don't have the optimistic asserter yet, far less an upgraded version of it. So maybe it's something to kind of punt down the road a little bit and simply including the security comments at the end for now, so that when we do actually upgrade the optimistic asserter in future, we are aware that we might need to alter the UMIP or at least take into account that concern before deploying a new version of the optimistic asserter. Would that be acceptable, Reynes?
Yeah, totally. I think that's a good call out to just not to forget about this edge case and also to have it covered. And I think that totally makes sense.
Yeah, that sounds good to me too.
Cool. In that case, I think that's the only condition to be added to this UMIP. I do see there's still some outstanding comments, but it seems like they're all effectively resolved. They just need closed off.
Yeah, I think they're for this one. I think by substance all of them are answered. So it's a matter of adding this one note on security considerations for potential upgrade.
Cool. Excellent. Thanks, folks. Anything else anyone else wants to raise? Excellent. Great discussion. And be good to see the optimistic asserter being used. Thanks, folks.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Barry.
All right.